Hi, I'm John Leonard. I'm a corporate lawyer with Fairfield Woods in Denver, Colorado. We have a series of informative videotapes on different aspects of the law. And today we're talking wills and trusts with one of my colleagues, Tim Jordan. We've done one on wills, one on trusts, a couple on trusts. We're going to continue on trends in trust. Let's talk about this idea of who's the trustee, what does the trust shield the assets from? Hey, let's talk about asset protection. I mean, that's all kind of related, isn't it?
It is. So when I'm meeting with clients with children and also a married client, one of the questions is, how do you leave your surviving spouse's inheritance to your surviving spouse? And then ultimately, on the second death, how do you leave the inheritance to the children? And when I first started doing this in the mid-90s, pretty common distribution scheme for children was that they would maybe get a third of their inheritance at age 25, maybe half of the balance at age 30 and the rest at 35. So in other words, a trust for a child terminated at age 35, they'd received all their inheritance. It became their personal asset at that point in time. For a number of years now, that the trend has been a little bit different. There's an opportunity there to protect the inheritance that you leave your surviving spouse and then ultimately children. And the way you do that is you leave their inheritance in a trust. So in other words, they don't get their inheritance outright in their name at any point in time. It stays in this trust. And by doing so, we can protect those assets. So those assets, as long as they're left inside that trust structure, are protected from a child's divorce, if they get sued, if they have tax problems with the IRS. These assets inside the trust are protected. So
just because I'm a beneficiary doesn't mean a creditor can get to it.
Correct.
Can they get to it when it's distributed?
If it comes out, if it gets distributed, then a creditor can come in and take that.
What if you set up? Well, let's use a couple of examples. If I'm living in a house that the trust owns, the creditor can't get it. That's easy. But if I get a monthly stipend, could a creditor get that monthly stipend?
So if a trust is required to distribute out a certain amount to a beneficiary each month, then once that comes out, a creditor can go after that. So we generally do not structure trusts where there are required distributions. It's usually purely discretionary.
And who decides that? Is there a bank that's a trustee, or is the beneficiary a trustee, or some third party? How does that work?
It could be any of those or a combination of those. So oftentimes what we do is if we have a child, for example, that's a beneficiary of a trust, depending on their age and how responsible they are. What we do oftentimes is we'll say that child can become a co-trustee of their trust at a certain age. And maybe that age is 25. So
trustee with who or what? Bank?
With another trustee. It could be a bank. It could be another family member. And the idea is at 25, and it can be any age. I'm just using that as an example. But at 25, they have the right to be co-trustee of their trust. So they're working with another trustee. You could look at it kind of as a mentoring process. Let's say we have a trust with $5 million in it. That child's learning how to, what does that mean? With $5 million, how do we invest it? How do we make distributions? And then at a later age, perhaps age 30, then that child can become the sole trustee of their trust. So then, they basically take over making all decisions. And those ages are flexible. It depends on the people and the families and the maturity of the children. But that's generally how we structure things these days, because it's a real opportunity to protect the assets that you've left the child. And the big risk these days is divorce. And I always tell people it takes two people to get married and only one to get divorced.
Okay.
So sometimes it's beyond the child's control whether their marriage thrives or fails.
Right.
And if we create this trust structure to receive a child's inheritance, then those assets are protected.
Well, good to know. We're doing trusts, not wills, is the subject of one of our prior tapes. And we've just delved into how you protect those assets once they're in trust. They go to your spouse, surviving spouse, and then the kids. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll continue on talking to Tim about trusts and trends in trusts. Thanks for joining us today.